We agree, and we agree to disagree. But now, let's look at the actual problem. I believe this, you believe this, you believe this. We don't know the truth because the governance is so far disconnected from us that we've all got our own interpretation of the reality of it. How do we fix that? So as we all fall into the same truth, which there can only be one truth in among all of those, and we are only ever going to find the truth by coming together in union and working that out as a unified community.
That there are lies in the facets of everything that we see, that are telling us to be scared when all we ever are is free.
So, I just made my video where there was a deer right here at the beginning. I don't know if I get it in the shot, but about mandatory packs and my advice, because people are asking my advice. And I am going to move actually while I'm talking to you. I thought I'd just make one on masks and what I'm seeing online, because it bothers me quite a bit what I'm witnessing. It upsets me, is what I mean by bothering. Like, it actually upsets me what I'm seeing, because people are being so rude to one another, so uncivil, so mean, just not really human behavior that you want, is how I would say that I perceive this. So, masks are becoming mandatory, and a lot of people disagree with this, and I want to show something that is being I want to show something that is being overlooked, and there's a thread running through all of it. Humanity has survived on union and advanced on union. It's only in recent years we've been told to fight for independence by our leadership, whilst the leadership and their families stay unified. And I always found that a bit weird. But one thing that I'm seeing on social media is union is not happening. People will form union, but they'll have clickiness. They won't bother with the people outside of their union. And this is sad because, for instance, you have at the moment a mainstream mindset, let's say, where people accept that there's a virus and they accept what the media has said about the virus and that they should wear a mask. And they have witnessed perhaps people who have been sick. We've all seen, I think, vlogs of people dying from corona. There's no doubting that the virus exists. And that's like one pocket. Then you have another pocket who think the virus doesn't exist at all, and these persons are going against reality. And it's a very tricky thing to deal with such people because they are getting their truth from unusual sources. But frontline workers, I have a cousin who's worked in ICU during the pandemic, and this is real. The symptoms, the effect on people's lives is real. Then you have another party that says, yes, the virus is real, but the media has made it bigger than it is and freaked everybody out. And I agree the media has become an absolute evil force in among this pandemic and scared everybody dreadfully in a way that if you lived in Tanzania, you would grasp it, because the Tanzanian president has opened up the country and said, look, we face bigger pandemics than this. More people die of malaria every day in our country. More people die of TB every year than this is ever going to kill. And he's right, it's true, HIV as well. And thus, I've lived like that, and it's a normal part of life. People aren't scared, they're not running. If the news, though, was constantly putting news articles that there's mosquitoes and they're going to give you malaria, and they came to England and everyone, I guarantee, would lock themselves inside and be spraying mosquito repellent everywhere. In Tanzania, though, people don't run away when they see a mosquito. They know they can give you malaria, but they just get rid of it, or they walk away from, or they kill the mosquito. If you drummed up the same behavior on the news as they've done about the pandemic, about mosquitoes in Tanzania, people would freak out. People would do the same thing as what the Europeans did regarding the virus. So I have concerns about the way the media is governed and running things, definitely, as well, as a person. But I also know this virus exists, and it is and has hurt people. Does it hurt people more than, say, the flu or malaria? Then this is all open for discussion. I'm not a scientist, I'm just a YouTuber, but I'm trying to share something that I've observed that no one else is saying. Now then you've got another party who thinks that this whole thing was created to manipulate society into a certain direction. And then let's say there's another party who think it's all a satanic happening and there's a spiritual foundation, and they point out things like Boris Johnson being in the hospital bed in the London 2012 Olympics, and that it was a ceremony to pre-predictively tell the world what they were planning to do, as some of these weird Luciferian belief systems do adhere to such strange concepts as that. And you have people like Madonna, who's an open Satanist, who's giving money to Bill Gates with a devil being crucified on her t-shirt while she does it, as if she couldn't be any more inflammatory if she tried. And you have all these parties, and one thing that all of those parties face, no matter how their mind interprets the situation, is they all feel they are facing an external threat. And the one thing humans have always done to get through external threats is union and having unity together. And unfortunately, for some reason, we're lacking that now. And people are being really harsh with each other. They're online making fun, sharing memes, mocking people. You're dumb because you don't wear a mask, says the person from the ego trap. You're dumb because you are wearing a mask, and I'm more woke than you because I don't wear one, says the person from the ego trap. We're all dependent on the system to some degree more than one another. I have to wear a mask to go in a supermarket to get food for my son and my pregnant wife. I have to. I have no choice. That is the rules here, or I can't go in and get my food. Does that make me someone who can be mocked by other people? Well, if they want to do that, if someone were to come to me and say, you sheeple, you're wearing a mask to go and get your food from the supermarket, I'd go, I've been living off the grid, providing for myself and farming for many, many years while you've been dependent on the supermarket. You see, I would never do it because it's just egoic. It's an ego trap. And this is the problem we have to get into understanding, is what we're facing is an external threat, no matter which way you interpret it. But what we are missing is the actual problem here, I think it exposes, is that the gap between the working classes and the governance is so vast that we fill that gap with so much distrust and concern, so much lovelessness, that we are so frustrated at that gap that we blame each other instead of addressing the actual problem. In England, the Conservative Party is mostly made up of politicians who went to private schools like Eton. My family could never have afforded that. Most kids in working class schools are never told how to become politicians. It's never even crossing their minds that they can get into that stuff. Those other schools, they're teaching how to be leaders, how to be MPs, etc. There's a gap between the classes and the elite class. And that's what this pandemic, no matter where you sit on the fence, exposes, is for the people who believe the mainstream and they don't understand all the others are like that because of the gap. For those who think the mainstream people are controlled, what they're saying is that there's a disingenuous gap between you and the leadership. And no matter where you sit, that gap is part of the problem. And actually, that is what's exposed by the pandemic. And the one thing that should be threading through all of this is union. Because we are facing an external threat collectively, and that threat is actually the system that is there to provide us with many benefits that we do receive. Many people are calling for anarchy, but you don't want anarchy. You don't want kids to suffer. You don't want people to starve. You don't want the system to crumble down around you, because most of you won't survive, and it would be awful, and people would suffer who shouldn't suffer. What we want is change, and we need a change that is going to be lasting. We need to formulate change the same way we always have, and that's together. And if there's a gap between the leadership of the countries and the governments and the banks and the working class people, the last thing we need is the working class people mocking each other. We can all say, okay, we agree. We can disagree and still be friends. We agree and we agree to disagree. But now, let's look at the actual problem. I believe this, you believe this, you believe this. We don't know the truth because the governance is so far disconnected from us that we've all got our own interpretation of the reality of it. How do we fix that? So as we all fall into the same truth, which there can only be one truth in among all of those, and we are only ever going to find the truth by coming together in union and working that out as a unified community. And thus we shouldn't look down on each other. We shouldn't make fun of one another because one person believes this, one person believes that. We should always look, is this coming from a place of love? And if it's not coming from a place of love, don't do it. Just pause and let your emotions settle and then come back at it from a place of love and accept that that is the problem. If you've got one person who believes the mainstream and another who thinks that this is all being done to take away liberties, to change the way the planet is governed, etc., then they can agree on one thing, that there's such a gap between the belief in the leadership that somehow they are both interpreting it differently. And thus, the problem lay in that gap, because somebody's right and somebody's wrong. And the only way to find that out will be to get together and change that gap, to shorten that gap. And we're not going to get together unless we work in love on a common goal. And I've said it before, if you have a Buddhist, a Muslim, a Christian, a Hindu, a Sikh, a shaman, and they're all walking on a common goal to help somebody, and they all have one tool, and all together it will help that person when they get there. If they start arguing about who's right on the way to that, instead of unifying their common good, their common love, on the goal, the unified goal, if they start arguing that I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right, at the very best, they're slowed down getting there, or at the very worst, one leaves and then you don't have a solution for the problem they were aiming to go and help. Say a family. They're all walking down a 10-kilometer valley. They must make that walk in union, unified around the common love and compassion that we all have inside us to help that family. But unfortunately, somebody starts piping up, I don't believe in Hinduism, I don't believe in Christianity, and they all fall out and nothing gets done. That's exactly what we are witnessing with this behavior. And I just want to put that out and just remind people and say, wherever you sit on that line of interpretation of world events, a little love can go a really long way. And remember, we can disagree and still be friends. And I would strongly advise that we always remember that we can disagree and still be friends, and then ask, why can this person's interpretation of reality be so different to my interpretation of reality? What is the failing inside our system that allows for that to happen? Because it shouldn't be able to happen, but it does. And the problem is the gap economically and in the classes between the working class and the elite class and the governance class. We don't trust. We don't believe, because we're so disconnected from it. It's so untransparent that we can't all believe on the same truth, because we don't know what to believe, because that gap is too big. And that's the common unified goal, that we can all together work as unified as what we want is truth and love and light for our world and our families. We can unify on fixing that gap. Then when the next problem comes on the planet, at least then, more than likely, we'll all know the truth instead of having various different pockets of interpretation of what's going on. I love you all. And disagree, still be friends. God bless, guys. Bye.